Rio Ferdinand, more like Rio-diculous. Welcome back to Black and White Banter. Now, all us Newcastle fans were looking forward to was a nice 2 weeks without any football. I don't think any of us have looked forward more to an international break than the one we are having right now. No dramas off the field, no awful newspaper headlines, no Steve Bruce Brucey ball, no feeling on a Saturday night like you're going to punch your missus in the face after enduring another 90 minutes of what we can't even describe as football at the moment. Just a nice 2 week holiday away from the shite we've had to put up with. And then Rio Ferdinand decides to chip in. And Paul Merson's not far behind him. And Gabby Agbonlahor, have I even said that right? All decide to chip in. Now, I didn't want to do any rant videos over the 2 week international break. I was going to come in with some which would you rather, some best 11s of the past. But I'm sorry, Rio, if you meant to trigger us Newcastle fans, you've probably done a good job. So I've already posted on social media, on Facebook and Instagram, our thoughts about the comments from all three pundits. So let's just delve a little bit deeper and talk about the absolute shite that's come out of all three's mouth in the last week or so. So, Paul Merson, for anyone who's maybe been on Uranus or a different planet for the past couple of weeks and hasn't picked up a newspaper or been in a Facebook or Instagram group, what he decided to come out and say about Newcastle fans is, and I quote, "We still wish and expect to be in the top six, and we are living in the Ginola days." Hang on, Merce. Let's just backtrack a second. So, us Newcastle fans who've had to put up with the Ashley era now for what? God, what year did he take over? You're talking, is it 15 years he's been at the helm now? Whatever. For the majority of that time, Paul, and for a very, very long time even before that, us Newcastle fans have pretty much been through relegation battle after relegation battle, after disappointment of manager leaving, frustration in management appointments, stadium changes, net spends being abysmal, probably rivaled by some championship teams, decent managers coming in and getting the boot. Don't need to name any names on that one, but he ended up leaving because he didn't have what he wanted to push the club forward. And now we've got Steve Bruce. So I don't know what Newcastle fans you're talking to, Paul, but I can honestly say from fans I know myself, from supporters groups, from being in and around all of the news and the opinions and verdicts of fans on this powerful platform we now call social media, that not one of us, Paul, expects top six. Do you know all we want, Paul, in an ideal world? We want a football club who's going to give us a bit of hope, a bit of ambition, and just something to cheer about. And at least more than 5 or 6 touches in the opposition box on a Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock. We do not expect top 10, top 6, maybe a couple of rounds in the cup just to give us something to believe in, maybe field our strongest 11 in the cup and not get knocked out by League One and Championship minnows. We do not for a second live in the entertainer days, and I think any Newcastle fan who is still living in the Keegan era, they are the crazy ones, and I'm still yet to come across one. So I don't know who you're speaking to, Paul, because let's face it, you don't have many connections with the North East. And it doesn't surprise me that this fabricated opinion that us Newcastle fans have had to put up with now for the last decade, that we have unrealistic expectations and we are unreasonable in wanting managers out and wanting changes, has always been fabricated by the London-based media companies, i.e. the newspaper. So it's no surprise to me at all, Paul, that that's where your opinion probably comes from. Because what accent do you come out with, and where did you used to play your football? Oh, hang on, that's it, London. Absolute bollocks. You just stick to Sky Sports, mate. The only person I'm going to listen to on there is probably Jeff Stelling. And even Jeff Stelling has realised in his tweet this week that Newcastle fans, yeah, I was wrong about you. What you're saying is right. Because we watch our football club every single week. We buy our strips, we read the news, we live and breathe our football club, which means we go through the heartache and we go through the tears, we go through the happier days, every single bit. What you pundits do, and I'll get on to Rio and Gabby in a second, what you pundits, like the likes of Paul Merson do, is all you base a lot of your knowledge off is statistics, football and highlights. You might watch the odd Newcastle game here and there if it's a Saturday night match and you're sat in with the missus with a glass of wine. You are not in a position to question Newcastle fans' opinions on the likes of Steve Bruce as coach, the likes of the absolute dross football we've had to put up with, our opinions on Mike Ashley. So please, Paul, just put a sock in it. Now, Rio Ferdinand, the main trigger for this. If anyone hasn't heard, Rio Ferdinand believes that Newcastle fans, if we're so fed up with Ashley, should all chip in some money and buy the club ourselves. Rio, bit of advice. If you're going to spout about Mike Ashley and your opinions on him as a businessman and a football club owner, being the football man you are, you've played and spoke about being a pundit for football all of your life, so you know football inside out. I'm not doubting that. You've played the game to a much higher standard than me, and you probably know a lot more about that side of things. Don't bring an opinion out on a man who sells your snide sports gear in his shops around the country. At least have a bit of credibility to make an opinion on a man, an unpopular opinion that you know is going to trigger Newcastle fans without any bias from a neutral point of view. We all know, as most of the country does, that he sells, no doubt with a 30% off sticker, like everything else in Sports Direct that's probably had 30% off for about a year and a half. He sells your shite in his stores. So for you to come out and stand up for Mike Ashley is absolutely embarrassing, mate. It's really embarrassing. I've never been a massive fan of you as a pundit. I still laugh at to this day about the Ollies at the wheel banter. But for you to come and stand up for him, it's just... And if you are putting the fishing rod out, Rio, then I guess you need to get a hobby. I know we're all in lockdown, but you really need to get something to do. So, coming away from the bias point of view, if Rio did believe this, that the fans should chip in, that we've been unreasonable, if you don't like it, buy the club yourselves, let's just switch that to Man United being unhappy. They've had protests against the Glazers in the past. If it was Man United, would Rio really be telling the Man U fans to all chip in and pick out some money? Just have a day off, Rio. Again, similar to Paul's opinions, absolute bollocks, and us Newcastle fans don't buy it for a second. You know, as I said, you weren't my favourite pundit before. You're certainly not going to be my favourite pundit now. But just in case this plan does come off, which I think is a foolproof plan, Rio, I did find £3 down the back of the sofa last night, just when I was cleaning the living room. So that's a good start to us buying a club. So any Newcastle fan watching this, have a look what's in the piggy bank. We'll all chip in and we'll see whether we can buy the football club. Cheers, Rio. Finally, Gabby Agbonlahor. Yes, I hadn't remembered or heard of him for a very, very long time now. I think he was injured most of his life. Don't know whether he's a pundit. Don't know what he's doing now. Don't know whether he's maybe just working in Aldi down the road. He's chipped in and stood up in support of Steve Bruce. Great coach, great manager. And we should get behind him. And he's never seen any club wrong. And he is going to steer us in the right direction. Well, Gabby, let me just speak again, as I mentioned at the start of this video. Us Newcastle fans watch every single Newcastle game week in, week out, without fail. If it's at 4 o'clock in the morning, the Australian fans who might be watching this, they wake themselves up at 4 o'clock in the morning to endure 90 minutes of that. I'm going to guess, Gabby, I'm just going to guess the only Newcastle game you might have watched recently is maybe us against Aston Villa on the Friday a couple of weeks ago because of your ties to Aston Villa. I'm just going to take a stab in the dark and say that you don't watch Newcastle every single week on Sky Sports or BT. Just a stab in the dark. And if you did, you would know that we are playing some of the worst football in, I'm going to say it, all 3 divisions at the moment. And what I'm basing that off is lack of touches in the box, lack of chances created, lack of shots on goal, lack of goals scored, and we leak goals at the other end. There is no plan, no tactics, no clue. And if you watch the Brighton game on Saturday, a week on Saturday, where we basically made Brighton look like they had stayed for 2 weeks, factory fortnight, all-inclusive, in the brain of Pep Guardiola, and stayed there, everything included, learned everything they know. That's how we made Brighton and Hove Albion look. And I'm not discrediting Brighton because they're a decent footballing team. But do not sit there and come out on your Twitter and you trolling, whatever you want to call it, on your news for us all to see on our news feeds that Steve Bruce is doing a good job and we should get behind him. Steve Bruce is one of the worst managers we have seen in our recent history. And we are playing some of the worst football I can remember in my lifetime, thanks to Steve Bruce. absolutely, that game against Brighton on Saturday was one of the worst. I think I touched on it in my match review. That was one of the worst performances I can remember in the 20 plus years I can at least, obviously not from a child, but remember Newcastle performances. And a guy on the radio said it was the worst he'd seen in 50. So excuse me, Gabby, for not quite getting on board with your opinions that Steve Bruce is a good guy and the players have got to start showing up for him more. Yes, I agree. It's down to the players as well. I don't doubt that at all. There's always a responsibility with the people who actually go on the pitch, but they are not playing for this man because they do not buy into his absolute lack of everything and just general shite. The players are calling him out. And funnily enough, Gabby, the players that you mentioned in your comments this week that should be giving us a bit more. Matt Ritchie, well, he's the one who called Bruce out for being a coward. I'm sure you probably read that because it was all over the news, probably all over Europe. The Longstaff brothers, guess what, Gabby? Steve's had issues with them as well, and he's pretty much just dropped them from existence. And who else did you mention? Andy Carroll. Well, if you watched the game against Brighton on Saturday, Gabby, you would realise that Steve Bruce played with no strikers on the field at one point, but he brought Sean Longstaff, who you're saying we need a bit more from. So we were at one point in that match with no forwards on. You're a forward, Gabby. How does that resonate with you? How would you like to be playing in a team that has no centre forwards on the pitch in a relegation battle, being 3-0 down? So I couldn't help but think, why would you have such an affiliation for this guy and stand up for him? Is it down to a friendship? Of course it's down to a friendship. This is the man who called us deluded back in November, Gabby Agbonlahor. I don't know why he's sticking his oar in for Newcastle. No attachment to us at all, but he seems to be putting his opinion out. He must be getting asked the question on the radio stations he's on. So most of these relationships are all affecting the opinions, and that's why these pundits like Rio Ferdinand, his business interests with Mike Ashley, Gabby with his opinions on Steve Bruce, he obviously loves as a bloke, and Paul Merson, who I'm sure has a lot of time for Steve, because we keep getting told off the pundits what a great guy he is. I said it when Steve came in. He's probably a nice guy to go for a pint with. But if you're going to make a football opinion that can be respected by fans who obviously listen to what you're saying because your opinions get airtime, if it was Sandra on Facebook, just after she's finished a yoga class, posting on Facebook that we should all chip in and buy the club, it wouldn't pick up much airtime. Maybe a few laughy comments, a few reactions. When someone like Rio Ferdinand or Gabby Agbonlahor puts their opinions out, it gets attracted by thousands. That's just the way life is. I accept that. But if you are going to make an opinion that's going to rile up football fans who watch and bleed for their team week in, week out, at least make it an opinion that's not affected by bias. Business interests, friendships, long-lasting relationships, just cut the shite. We see through it all. So to finish this video, all I'm going to ask any Newcastle fan watching this in future, if you see a pundit or read about a pundit coming out with a comment that calls us deluded, wanting Champions League, scrape down the back of your sofa for money to buy your own football club if you don't like your own. Steve Bruce is king. If you see any of this shite, Newcastle fans, just ignore it, because let's face it, we are going through enough of a shit show at the moment with our own football club. We're in a relegation battle. We've got a coach who's absolutely beyond repair, it seems. So we've got that to deal with. We've got injuries. We've got an owner who we've wanted out now for the best part of a decade. So we've got enough going on without being annoyed and riled up by these pundits coming out with these ridiculous opinions. And if they are doing it for the fishing rod, we need to stop biting. I know it's easier said than done as I sit here ranting and sound like a hypocrite, but enough is enough, Newcastle fans. Let's draw a line under it. So next time you see it, crack open a bottle of beer and just get on with your day. Let's focus on the important things like trying somehow to stay up this season. And breathe. If you've liked this video, Newcastle fans, as always, like and subscribe. My subscribers have jumped up quite a lot in the last week or so, and I'm absolutely loving to see it. The comments are coming in thick and fast, so let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll try and get back to every single one. If you haven't already, get us on Facebook and Instagram under Black and White Banter, and I promise for the rest of the international break, my next videos will be a bit more light-hearted, and we won't be ranting anymore, because that is us done with pundits, done with everything negative. We're just going to enjoy the international break and the lack of football. So go and enjoy the England games, crack open a few beers, and let Rio Ferdinand just sit there. Don't bite it. Don't buy into it. They're all friends. They all have business interests, and they all have some sort of reason for coming and spouting this absolute shite. And I'll hopefully catch up with you on the next video, Newcastle fans.